Hey everyone, welcome back to Bryan's Mysteries and Adventures on Trail. First I want to apologize because the video that I did on Thanksgiving where I said there would be the conclusion, this is going to be the conclusion video. However, in that video I did make some mistakes, and the reason for that is because there's actually been several cases that are very similar, sadly. So I did get most of it right, but the case that I was trying to focus on, I do have all the information now, and I can give more details than I thought I could, because originally the case that I was looking at has almost the exact same sort of scenario, except it's much more recent. But this case took place in 2004, or excuse me, I'm sorry, 1995. And it is deep in the Colorado wilderness, like I said. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to kind of give you guys the video again, basically from the start, real quick, tell you the story. But it was hunting season in 1995, and there was a couple by the name of John Dodson, or John Bruce Dodson, but he went by Bruce. So for this video, we'll call him Bruce, and his wife Janice Dodson, and they were living out in this remote area of Uncompahgre National Forest in Colorado. And apparently that they had met at work. Bruce at the time had been sort of a loner, and apparently Janice had gone through a rough divorce, and she had some bad bouts before. So they met at work, and things were going great. They had been married only 3 months. And it was the morning of October 15th of 1995 when they went out hunting. This was literally 3 months after their wedding, and Janice took Bruce on his first hunting expedition in Uncompahgre National Forest. Sorry if I'm mispronouncing that. It was an area that she knew very well. She had camped and hunted there before. Now, Bruce was an ex-Vietnam War veteran. He was a lab technician who his friends said that he was very compassionate and very intelligent, and they said that he fell very hard in love when he met Janice. So out on this trip, I'm sure he wasn't thinking of anything of it. Also, this particular day in the National Forest was Doug Kyle and Michael Madwell. They were 2 off-duty police officers from Texas that just happened to be hunting in the same area. Now, on the morning of October 15th, 1995, Kyle heard 3 gunshots near his campsite, which usually is a signal of distress. Now, soon after that, he saw Janice Dodson walk nearby, and she just simply said, "Hey, we're hunting in this area, we're fine, whatever." Then about an hour later, Kyle heard screaming. He rushed over to find Janice next to Bruce, who was lying face down on the ground, bleeding from an apparent gunshot wound on his back. The rifle and 3 spent shells were in the grass beside him. Now, apparently at this point, she was crying and carrying on. This is what Kyle later told the news and authorities. He said that he tried to reach around and see if Bruce had a pulse, and then he immediately ran up the mountain to get the authorities. And when he returned with the Mesa County Sheriff's deputies, they found the crime scene was very different. They could tell it had been altered. The deputy apparently went down with him, and they got looking around, and they said, "Janice, what did you do?" Bruce had been lying on his back, and Janice had covered him with a blanket. Janice said that she wanted to keep Bruce warm until law enforcement had arrived. But obviously authorities were concerned that she had now disturbed the crime scene, and who knows what else she could have done. Now, Janice told the sheriff's deputies that she and Bruce had woken up at that morning around 5 a.m. to go on this hunting trip. They decided that Janice would flush the game up from down the hill while Bruce waited in the meadow down below, ready to take aim. Well, they had agreed to return to this campsite at around 9:30 a.m., according to what Janice told authorities, but she decided to come back a bit earlier to change her clothes, put on new boots, overalls, because she said that she had walked through a nearby big muddy area. She said shortly thereafter she found her husband lying on the ground, and that was her story that she gave the authorities at the time. Apparently during all this she became really distraught, but it seemed to the sheriff's deputies that she was almost like acting. But of course they did airlift her to a nearby hospital to, I guess, try and calm her down, and Bruce's remains were transported to the medical examiner's office for an autopsy, which actually revealed that he had been shot 3 times. Now, this obviously told the authorities that Bruce's death was ruled to be a homicide and not a hunting accident, which ironically Janice had mentioned several times during her spiel to the authorities. Now, back at the crime scene, the investigator discovered 2 shell casings from a .308 caliber, which did not match either Bruce's or Janet's guns. The investigators also spoke to a man by the name of JC, whose camp was less than a mile from where Janice and Bruce had camped, and JC was actually Janice's ex-husband or ex-lover of some kind. Just weeks before Janice had married Bruce, he said that he received a strange visit from his ex-wife. He told detectives that she wanted to reconcile with him, but, he told her he wasn't interested, move on. But most people that knew Janice said that she was still infatuated with this guy, JC. And at the time, even though JC had an alibi because he was there with other hunters, the authorities were still sort of doubtful, and they were trying to piece this all together. And they also found it very odd that Janice and Bruce had set up their campsite so close to others in hunting season, because that's a no-no. You're supposed to give each other a certain amount of distance. And when Janice spoke to the detectives, she told them that JC didn't care for anybody she ever dated. Even after they were divorced, she said that JC always hated all the men in her life. She was kind of trying to push blame towards him, like maybe he had something to do with it. When she was actually told about the circumstances surrounding Bruce's death, she was like, oh, that doesn't make any sense. He was such a great guy. Who would want to do such a thing? The main detectives, Detective Booth and Dave Martinez, they literally started analyzing every detail of the last few days of Bruce's life, and they tried to reconstruct the incident. And the Booth theorized that Bruce was walking along the fence line at the time when he was first fired upon. Now, according to him, he thinks the bullet miraculously just pierced his clothing and only grazed his skin, and he thinks that is why they found Bruce's orange vest next to him instead of on him. He thinks that he took it off and waved it around and started yelling to people that he wasn't a deer, trying to make it a sign that he was a human with this orange vest. But then, unfortunately, he was shot 2 more times. And one of the bullets had actually struck a fence post, and investigators were able to actually trace the path of what they believed came from. So they were able to see where they believed the shooter was sitting, and they went to that location and they found another spent .308 caliber casing. Now, of course, it wasn't from either Bruce's or Janice's weapon. However, they had their suspicions because they had learned that Janice Dodson's ex-husband, JC, who was camped just, like 3/4 of a mile away, he had reported one of his rifles stolen like a week before Bruce had been shot. So it was all starting to make sense to them, but they still needed a lot of pieces to come together. Now, authorities did have a lot of suspicion around Janice. They did give her a polygraph test around 3 months after this incident, and she did show deception on 2 of the questions, but other than that, they didn't really have any evidence against her. However, within a month of his death, she had sold off his home, she sold his car, she sold his horse, and she was seen gambling a lot at various casinos throughout Louisiana. and just very bizarre behavior. This was not the behavior of a grieving widow. Within the first year after this happened, Janice had moved on with basically her whole life. She had remarried, she had relocated to Texas, and the investigators, of course, were still doggedly pursuing this. They learned that she had asked her new husband, a man by the name of Bart, to take out a life insurance policy of over $100,000. They were still trying to find the original weapon that was used in Bruce Dodson's case. So they remembered Janice's original story, how she had said that she had gotten all dirty and had to go back home to change her clothes. So they returned to the National Forest in Colorado, and they focused on this bog, which was not that far from Janice's camp, and it's near a pond near JC's camp, which contained a type of clay, I guess, that was very unique to that area. And this was according to GeoTimes. This is a magazine that's affiliated with the American Geological Institute. Anyway, remembering Janice's story of wading through this bog, the investigators took dirt samples from the pond and the bog, and they compared them from evidence found on Janice's boots and overalls. The samples were then taken to the Colorado Bureau of Investigation, where they were forensically analyzed by Jacqueline Battles. And she conclusively concluded that the mud that was found on Janice Dodson clothing was consistent with the same samples from the pond where JC's campsite was, and it was enough because that's where the gun was stolen from JC's campsite, and it was enough to get a warrant for her arrest. She was taken into custody and charged with first-degree murder. This is according to the Colorado newspaper, the Montrose Daily Press. And then in March 2000, she was found guilty and sentenced to life in prison without parole. And of course, during the trial, she tried to blame it on JC. She tried to say then that her husband Bruce was mean to her and he was being abusive, which none of was purely unfounded. Everybody that knew Bruce knew him to be a very loving, caring guy, and he was really happy when he met Janice. And this was only 3 months after they had gotten married. This was all planned by Janice. She did this purely for greed and money. She had set this up. She had made Bruce get a bunch of life insurance plans, and it's just absolutely unbelievable that someone could do such a thing. And then it seemed to authorities that she was planning to do it with her next husband that she had married down in Texas, because she was following the same pattern. And thankfully they caught up to her and arrested her before she could do it to anybody else. But Janice will spend the rest of her life in prison, and that's where I believe she belongs. People like this are just unbelievable. And the investigators and authorities were able to prove that she had been planning this basically from the beginning of their marriage. Even some speculate that she started planning it before they got married, because Janice was somebody that liked to gamble. She was terrible with money. She had had a past bad relationship. It's impossible to prove this, but the fact is that this trip they took was 3 months to the day that they had gotten married. Janice had set it up. She had purposely made sure that her ex-husband was there because apparently she was still infatuated with him. So she made sure that he was there, and it was his weapon that she stole to use in this crime to obviously try and implicate him. She had put a lot of devious thinking into this plot, and I'm just very glad that the authorities and everybody were able to track her down, and she's where she belongs now. And my thoughts and prayers go out to John Bruce Dodson, who was only 48 years old at the time. And, he was a loner up to that point, and he was so excited about this marriage. He fell in love with a coworker he really liked, and I'm sure not in his wildest dreams did he ever think anything like this would ever happen. Who would? It's just... So my thoughts and prayers go out to all of his family and friends and everybody that knew him, and all the investigators that worked so hard to bring Janice to justice. And yeah, I'm just glad that they were able to catch her, and she's behind bars. I want to thank everybody for watching as always, and please be respectful in the comments if you choose to leave them. Special thank you to co.ag for providing the background music, and I will see everybody in the next one. Take care. Hey everyone, thanks for sticking with me to the end, and I'm sorry about the confusion with the first part of this video. And anyway, I am happy that I was able to present the full video to you today. And as always, if you guys have any comments or feedback, and if you haven't already subscribed, I'd be really so appreciative if you supported the channel, gave me a chance, subscribed if you haven't already. I appreciate any and all feedback. If anyone is interested in buying a merch calendar, they are $17, and you can use my Venmo or PayPal account, which is listed in the description. And I'm sorry I haven't been able to comment back on as many of the most recent videos. I've had family in town and just been visiting, and things have been really busy and crazy, but it's been great being able to see family I haven't seen in a while. And I hope all of you have had a great Thanksgiving weekend and are looking forward to a wonderful holiday season. And I would love to hear about all your holiday traditions and things that you guys do every year. So definitely leave me those comments too, because even though I haven't been able to comment back, I have been reading a lot of your comments, and I appreciate all your feedback. And thank you so much for all your support. And I will see everybody in the next one. Take care.